And here we go. 1 through 4, Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Cincinnati. Your biggest movers in the penultimate college football playoff rankings. Michigan up 3 spots following the win over Ohio State. The Buckeyes, meanwhile, they fall 5 all the way down to number 7. Notable on the back end as well, Notre Dame and Oklahoma State swapping spots. The Cowboys with that win over Oklahoma. The Irish blew the doors off Stanford. For more, let's get our guys in the mix. We say hello to CBS Sports ranking analyst Jerry Palm and big game Dennis Dodd, our college football insider. Gentlemen, I ask you each and every week to read between the lines for us. Dennis, we'll go your way first. Your initial reaction is what?
I'm most concerned about Oklahoma State. I thought that if they won this week against Baylor, another top 10 win, that they'd be in. But the way I see the rankings right now is if Alabama wins and creates 2 spots for the SEC, and Cincinnati and Michigan win, I would be concerned if I was a Cowboys fan right now, because you're going to be compared to the Big Ten champion at 12-1 Michigan and an undefeated Cincinnati, which I think has earned its way. I know Jerry talks about their schedule, and it's bad, but they would be the only undefeated team left in the country in that scenario. So Oklahoma State, to me, would end up at 5th, or at least outside of the top 4.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. The worst case scenario for Cincinnati and, life in the group of 5 is you don't control your own fate, right? Even undefeated Cincinnati, one of 2 remaining teams. If Alabama beats Georgia and everybody else that's favored wins, then you've got a situation where the committee has to pick between 13-0 Cincinnati and 12-1 Oklahoma State, who's got 3 wins over teams in the top 15. And Cincinnati's got 1. It's Notre Dame. It's the best win of the bunch. But I would not be surprised if Oklahoma State won that battle, but I would not predict it. I expect Cincinnati would get the call, but that's the one scenario where Cincinnati has some doubt if they win their conference championship. I don't think there's any way Cincinnati finishes below 2-loss Alabama. Even if Alabama makes the college football playoff, I don't think they're ahead of Cincinnati. But you're right, Oklahoma State has got to be concerned. But, all you can do is play the games, and it's a very rare year where we have had a group of 5 team among the competitors for these final spots. And otherwise, Oklahoma State would be a shoo-in at this point.
Yeah, that's no doubt the biggest pressure point and the longest conversation the committee is going to have if things do stand pat here coming out of conference championship weekend. But if rivalry weekend taught us anything, that the expected outcome is not always the final outcome. The expected outcome in the game was that Ohio State, that defense rounding in a form, that offense high-powered, would take care of Michigan. That was not the case. Michigan looking fantastic in that win over the Buckeyes, Jerry. They move up to number 2 as you expected. How's their case right now as they go into that game with Iowa?
Winning, they're in. It's as simple as that. There's no way Michigan can fall out of the top 4 with a win. It's really only Cincinnati that could fall out of the top 4 with a win. So, Michigan is in great shape. If they win, they will be 2 or 3, depending on the outcome of the SEC game, and then what the committee would do with Georgia if they lose. But if Alabama's definitely 1 if they win, and then Georgia, Michigan, 2-3. But yeah, that's a great win for Michigan, a big win for their program, a big win for Jim Harbaugh, who won the game he was finally hired to win. And it's we're going to see a lot of new blood in the college football playoff this year, regardless of what happens. And I know that'll make some people happy. In fact, we could have 4 teams that have hardly been in it at all. Georgia has before, but Michigan hasn't. Oklahoma State hasn't. Cincinnati surely hasn't. So, yeah, we're going to have a lot of new faces in the college football playoff this year.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the previous segment that we've only had 12 teams play for this whole thing. And Jerry's right. Michigan is playing great. It doesn't really matter whether they're ranked this week in the top 4, because if they win and they're in. But I'm starting to talk myself into Iowa having a realistic upset chance, because they're like watching a sumo wrestler try to dunk the ball. He's gonna sit on you and kill you, but he's not going to dunk the ball, but he's going to win some way or the other. You know what I'm talking about? They're like spilled milk. You can't stop everything at once. Special teams, defense. Yeah, the offense is bad, but they seem to get things done. Look at how they came back against Nebraska. Block punt that landed in the guy's arms like he'd been led for a bomb. I mean, how often does that happen? So I'm starting to think with Iowa, with no pressure, nothing to play, well, a lot to play for, but, could knock Michigan out. And Michigan riding that big high from the Ohio State game might not be all the way committed. You would think they are, but that's where I am. I think Michigan deserves to be in, winning they're in, but watch out for Iowa.
The most dangerous one in the room is the one with nothing to lose, and those are the Hawkeyes. Should be a fun Big Ten championship in Indy. Plenty to lose when it comes to the Alabama Crimson Tide. It is a win and you're in situation for the Tide as well, who have been there countless times before. But we take a look at this and we have the conversation every week, gentlemen, and it's one of my favorite conversations we have all week. 2-loss Bama, the hypothetical that they lose a close one to Georgia in the SEC title game. Dennis, are you coming around for us?
I am not. I don't think there'll be a 2-loss Alabama in competition for the same reason that they're in this in the first place. I don't think they'll beat Georgia. I don't think they have the team to beat Georgia. Georgia's been playing for this, as Cade McNamara said, to paraphrase Cade McNamara last Saturday, we've been playing these guys since January. And I know what he means. That's winter conditioning, 7-on-7, spring ball. They've worked in Alabama stuff. All year. Georgia has worked in Alabama stuff all year, and vice versa. They were on a collision course to play this game. So again, I don't think they deserve to be in the top 4 at all with 2 losses. I thought they slopped around too much with Auburn. The loss to Texas A&M looks worse by the minute. Texas A&M is in the top 25 this week at 8-4. So this isn't a powerhouse they lost to. This was a 2-touchdown underdog with a backup quarterback, and they lost at the gun. Great, bravo, Alabama. You're not one of the 4 best in the country, regardless.
Yeah, I understand all of that. If Alabama takes Georgia to the wire, and is only the second team to do that this year, because Clemson, the very first game of the season, played them in a close game, then I think that gives the committee something to think about. But otherwise, no, I'm with Dennis. I don't see Alabama being one of the top 4 teams unless there's a chaotic scenario that puts them back in play, like Michigan loses, Cincinnati loses. When you start to get to the point where you're picking a bunch of 2-loss teams, then yeah, Alabama is back in play. But I think if they're the only 2-loss team in play, it's going to be pretty hard to put Alabama in unless they really impress in a loss against Georgia.
All right, so that's where we stand on 2-loss Alabama. You gentlemen have already made the case for and against Cincinnati, despite if they win or lose. If they lose, we obviously know the fate. If they win, it's a conversation that needs to be had. But broadening that conversation here, Dennis, what would a berth into the college football playoff for a non-Power 5 mean in the grand scheme of things when we're talking about these teams, who really belongs in, a potential expansion of the college football playoff? What are some of the ripple effects out of Cincinnati hypothetically being in?
Joe, you teed me up. I'm sitting here writing about it right now, that a group of 5 team has never been in the playoff. A group of 5 team has never played for a national championship. The last time you can even think about it happening was BYU in 1984. But back in 1984, BYU was considered a major college football program. They weren't outside the Power 5 because there was no Power 5. So nothing's happened before that. Nothing's happened since in the championship era, since the BCS started. And the closest any of these teams have ended is TCU at number 2, I think, in 2010, and Utah in 2008. But they weren't allowed to play for it. This would be opening a door and a window in what a college football playoff, expanded playoff, would look like. Because you'd have at least one of these teams, and maybe multiples, given a 12-team field. Every year, they'd be all but guaranteed into the field. What would that look like TV ratings-wise? What would that look like upset-wise? The thing I'm writing about is the Cinderella, never been embraced in college football in its history. It's the lifeblood of the NCAA tournament, but for some reason, tradition, snobbery, TV ratings, the game as a whole has never gotten behind a team like Cincinnati. And we'll see what happens, if they do get in.
Yeah, if Cincinnati gets in, what it means is a whole new respect for that level of a program. For Cincinnati to go and win at Notre Dame and put together the kind of resume that gets them selected, first of all, it shows everybody else how to do it. But then it just shows a whole new level of respect for that kind of a program and that level of a program. And then, of course, we'll have to see what Cincinnati does once they get there to continue to earn that respect. But just getting there alone is a big step for the group of 5 in general. And then, when we have an expanded playoff, you're going to have probably, maybe a couple of these teams in, and we'll see what they can do in those situations as well. But that's a few years off. It's just a remarkable season for Cincinnati. And I personally, as a fan, hope they make it because I want to see what happens when they get there.
Yeah, going to be a lot of fun to watch this all play out over conference championship weekend, and then we will sit here next Tuesday and we will lose our minds over the final rankings, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun. But for now, we do need to talk about the Big 12 and that championship game, what it means in terms of the playoff. The Cowboys do move up to number 5 with that win over Oklahoma, so they can see in the window that you're talking about opening, Dennis, but not just yet on the inside. What sort of win do they need just in terms of style points and not just getting the job done, but making their case on Saturday, Dennis?
Well, I like Cincinnati. It would be nice if they won by double digits against a very quality Baylor team that already has a top 10 win on its resume in beating Oklahoma. And, what about Baylor if certain things happen? They'd have 2 top 10 wins on their resume. So, as I mentioned up top, I fear for Oklahoma State because they are number 5 looking in, and there's a way they can be shut out if everybody wins, if the right teams win up at the top. But it would behoove them, especially given the Big 12's history, to win in a blowout. Remember how this whole thing started in 2014 when TCU, ranked number 3, Jerry remembers this, won by 49 points against Iowa State and dropped out of the top 4. That's because Ohio State beat Wisconsin in an upset in the Big Ten championship game, and the rest is history. But it'd be a nice feather in the cap of the Big 12, and really another newbie. I'm almost to the point where I call Oklahoma State one of those Cinderella teams. Certainly not Group of 5, but when you're number 2 in your state,
no doubt.
Sometimes the hat fits, the glove fits.
Jerry, as we take a look at things beyond Oklahoma State, we do have to talk about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, their potential path in. It seemed like week after week, the percentage of that happening has decreased and decreased and decreased. The head coach now heading down to Baton Rouge. Things are changing right now for the Irish, and not in all the ways that they would like to see. Is there a path in? Because Dennis was doing some great reporting for us saying that the committee is not factoring Brian Kelly's departure into the way that they see Notre Dame. Simply put, a win over Oklahoma is better than a win over Stanford this season. But do the Irish still have any chance out in front of them?
Well, yes, they do. They're not going to lose this week. Unfortunately, they're also not going to win this week. So, they just sit there and they hope for upsets ahead of them. So They need at least 2 of Michigan, Cincinnati, and Oklahoma State to lose. And if that happens, and maybe really only one of them, losing might do it if Alabama loses as well. So 2 of those 4, I suppose, is what Notre Dame needs in order to get into the top 4 and feel pretty comfortable. But they're backdooring it. They have no way to make a statement to the committee this week. And I agree with not considering Brian Kelly's departure. To me, that he doesn't tackle anybody. He doesn't throw any passes. I mean, they can find somebody else to run the team, and they've got a month to prepare. So that's, to me, completely irrelevant, and I'm glad to hear that the committee is not considering that.
Yeah, Irish fans putting their Hawkeye gear on, and some other teams here in the days to come. Gentlemen, we appreciate your time as always. Before we let you go, we need your predictions. Dennis, I'll go your way first. Your final 4. Take us through it.
Number 1, Georgia. Number 2, Michigan. Number 3, Cincinnati. And because of that Georgia win, Oklahoma State gets in at number 4.
Yeah, those are my 4 as well. And obviously you're talking about favorites winning here. But if they do win, then I think you've got Oklahoma State over Alabama and Notre Dame for that 4th spot in the college football playoff. And Cincinnati is a 3 seed. Just making the playoff is one thing, but a 3 seed, that would be great.
JP, Dennis, fantastic stuff as always. We appreciate the insights. All right, taking a look now at the odds to win the CFP. Getting there's one thing. Getting the job done, a whole nother mountain to climb. Georgia, your odds-on favorite at -220. And then everybody else. Plus money on Bama at +650. Going to have to get through Georgia in that SEC title game, hypothetically. Michigan, 9-1 if you think that storied season rolls on. Oklahoma State, can they get in? Can they then execute? 14-1 for your money. And if you love Cinderella, love some Cincinnati at 18-1.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.